Hello, so this is an augment that I really like that got recently buffed, and I want to make a little video talking about it because it doesn't really fit into some of the other guide content that I've done on my channel, so I wanted to make a shorter, more focused video on particularly talking about that augment as well as how I evaluate it and why I think it's a little bit better than what it's worth, so to speak. But before we go into that, I just want to say, make sure to like and subscribe because it does help me out as a content creator. I am working on doing more guides for the next week. The item guide is going to be coming out tomorrow, very early on in the day. Hopefully, I'm going to be releasing the patch notes, like similar to last time. I kind of do like the patch rundown based on some of the PBE changes that have been happening. It worked out to be pretty accurate last time with only a couple tweaks and a couple changes. So I'm going to try doing it again on this Sunday because there is a patch on Wednesday. So if you're interested in that, the patch note guide, I'm going to go through it. Of course, I think Mortdog might do a patch rundown because he started streaming again today. So maybe he's back to doing content. So then you'll have at least 2 out there, but I still want to do mine because I was already working on it. So we'll see how it goes. Additionally, if you're interested in seeing the art that I did for the art convention, that's only for the dedicated fans that were watching me. My video didn't get recommended to anybody, but I did post a video yesterday from the convention showing the art that I had on display. You can check it out on my channel. Anyways, let's talk about the augment now. That's all the updates. Let's talk about the augment that I really like. No scout, no pivot. So you'll hear me talk about this augment a lot, and I remember when I was reading about the patch notes 2 weeks ago, I was like, wow, I can't believe they're buffing it. I already think this augment is particularly strong, and I think it's really worthwhile to take it a lot of the time. What is no scout, no pivot? Well, it's like kind of like a trade-off kind of augment. Basically, no units can no longer be benched or sold after fighting a player combat. So if you fight a player combat, all the units that are on your board are stuck on your board permanently, and that's it. They're always going to be there. And then after each player combat, units that fought will gain 14 health, 2% attack damage, and 2% ability power. So when you're playing this, you're usually hard forcing towards some sort of low cost reroll comm or in some particular other niche line, but you're typically saying to yourself, hey, the units that I have from my opener, these are units that are going to stay on my board. I'm not going to pivot to anything else. I'm not going to change anything else. I'm going to commit to a certain line. Now that has its downsides, obviously, not playing flexibly, not being able to pick other units, and I'm somebody who actually really enjoys playing flexibly. So I'm not just taking this because I like to degenerately force anything and everything all the time. I actually try and keep my options really open. I just think the value from this augment is so powerful that I always consider it, and I often take it even if my spot isn't the most amazing for it, because I at least me in the times I've taken it, I've never gotten punished so far. I always end up in a top 1 or a top 2 whenever I take the augment, but maybe it's just because I'm like taking it from good spots as well. Hard to say. But anyways, let's do a little bit of a breakdown and some comparisons. So what I want to talk about is no scout, no pivot. If we're talking about it per stage, here I'm going to compare it to a prismatic augment. I'm going to do 2 comparisons with prismatic augments to kind of illustrate the way I see it a little bit or the way I analyze it. When you're looking at no scout, no pivot, you're getting 14 health, 2% attack damage, and 2% ability power on the units that are on your board. So that means per stage, those units, if you have them in for an entire stage, it's going to be 5 player combats. Sometimes there might be other stuff like, you know, I don't want to get into it, but you know, of course, like things can change. But generally speaking, you're going to be getting 70 HP, 10% AD, and 10% AP, which is a good chunk of stats, and that's per stage scaling up from stage 2. A lot of times when you're playing around a no scout, no pivot board, you're playing a low cost reroll comm. So a lot of times you are purposely going to be making yourself really strong early on in the game because that's the cadence of reroll. You roll your gold early to hit your low cost units, upgrades, and then that's your gold investment that you're using early is going to put you in a good spot later. So a lot of times when you think about no scout, no pivot, it's taking a reroll line, which is already good for your early game. You're already going to have a decent stage 2 a lot of the times and stage 3 a lot of the times playing reroll. That's like the whole point. And then by the time you get to stage 4 and stage 5, you are now scaling your comp to a dramatic level. If you think 70 HP and 10% AD isn't that much, let's compare it to cybernetic implants, which is a prismatic augment. So cybernetic implants, if we read it here, you gain 200 health and 30% attack damage if the unit is holding an item. So not only do you have to have items on the units or have an item or a component on the unit to gain those stats, it only gives 200 health and 30 attack damage. Now that is a prismatic augment. That is a very powerful augment. We're looking at a gold augment comparing it to a prismatic augment. If you count like 70 HP, 10% AD, 10% AP, it will take you 3 stages to surpass the prismatic augment, right? You will have more HP on your board after 3 stages because you'll have 210 HP per unit on your board. You will have more AD, or roughly the same AD, 10% times 3, 30%, but you'll also have the scaling AP, which can help your damage output on all your units, and this applies to every unit on your board. This is just an illustration of it takes around 3 stages. So, imagine you take it on 2-1, that's stage 2, stage 3, and then by the end of stage 4, you are better than a prismatic. On stage 4, you're approximately the same as a prismatic because you have like more units that are gaining stats. So you can like extrapolate, it's like around the same. But usually by the time you get to stage 4, which is where your reroll comm, especially if you're playing a low cost reroll, starts to fall off, you are now getting more and more powerful, which actually tapers your curve to give you, in my opinion, a much easier time getting a higher placement. So that's like kind of the breaker point, right? If you can play no scout, no pivot, and you can last 3 stages with units in, it puts you in a good spot. And of course, this is a little bit of an exaggeration because you won't have all your units in on the first round of stage 2, right? Only like 3 units on stage 2 will probably be getting this much stats. So, there is going to be a tapering off. I understand that. But then the fights can also the game could also last longer, and you can make it to stage 6, and then you get an astronomically large lead on stats as well. Another comparison I want to do is Calculated Enhancement, right? Calculated Enhancement is another prismatic augment. It just gives different stats here. Instead of giving HP, we're looking at AD and ability power. Here it's giving 40% AD and 50 ability power. So you are getting more value, but it's only on 4 champions. Typically with no scout, no pivot, you're scaling more than 4 champions. And this augment too can be outscaled. It might just take a little bit longer. And it also doesn't give you HP. So you're getting the extra HP, which helps out your front line a lot, in addition to having the AD and the ability power. So the point that I'm trying to make here is that when I look at no scout, no pivot, I see a prismatic augment in disguise. Obviously, it has a huge downside. That's why it's not a prismatic augment. But if you play it from a decent spot, just don't be scared of it. I know it might seem a little bit stressful of who do I put in and how do I play around it, but it's something that can actually help you out quite a bit. I think something else that it really opens up is the idea of it being a sum of its parts a lot of the times when you play around no scout, no pivot. A lot of times, I always say this, as a lot of beginner players ask the same question, like how many units should I 3-star, which unit should I 3-star? And the thing that I always tell people is the first bullet point on this side, right? On this slide, excuse me. When you're 3-starring units and you're playing a reroll comp, a lot of times if you cannot itemize a 3-star unit, they kind of do nothing. Because if they're 3-starred and they don't have items, they don't have any scaling on their abilities, they don't have any scaling on their stats, they don't have anything that helps them to become an absolute unit. So a lot of times what I say is, if you have like one backline unit that's going to be your main carry, and you have one frontline that's going to be your main carry, 3-star that one, 3-star the other one, and then push levels for extra synergies, because it's not worth it to waste your gold hitting an extra 3-star because, they don't have items. The thing is, with no scout, no pivot, you're getting so many stats on each of the units. You can think of it almost like everybody's holding a mini Warmogs, a mini Rabadons, and a mini Deathblade, right? Of course, it's not actually that good, but it's like a mini version, like a very tiny version of it. So they actually all get a little bit of extra scaling. If they have a stronger ability, they're going to have more AP, they're going to have more AD, and they're going to have more tankiness. So a lot of times when you play no scout, no pivot, you actually break that rule and you try and roll for more 3-stars. A lot of times if you can 3-star your entire board, it actually helps out a lot because each of those units is an absolute monster. You don't really want to go to like level 9, level 10. It makes a lot of sense to like get a board that can complete itself by level 8 and 3-star everybody so that they all become absolute demons, and then only push levels after you've 3-starred as many units as you think are viable in that particular comp. It also helps because of the sum of its parts idea. Every unit is going to be doing a little bit of tanking, a little bit of damage, because they're going to get a lot of stats from those things. They're all going to be as if they're holding like an item that gives AP, something that's helping them, something that's helping them tank with the extra HP. So it helps out a lot to have these extra units that can just do a little bit of extra chip damage, because it becomes really effective, especially if you're playing something like no scout, no pivot. So you might be thinking, okay, so what are the options? I'm playing no scout, no pivot. What comp should I play? I'm going to go through a couple of them that work really well, or generally speaking work pretty well. But a lot of times if you have any line that can work as a reroll line, even if it's not a super meta reroll line, you can often outscale despite like anything that's going on with the actual units on the board. So long as it's like semi-viable, it usually can work out because you just get so many stats from it. Common reroll lines right now are actually 1-cost rerolls, which makes it really interesting to consider no scout, no pivot, because even if you don't have a particularly amazing one cost reroll line, because there's a lot of them that are really prevalent right now, it can actually help you to hit because you're basically playing the same cost as everybody else. They'll buy a bunch of some unit, you'll buy a bunch of the other units. It's actually pretty efficient a lot of times with rerolls. Obviously one cost, there's a lot of one cost in the pool, so it's not going to be as effective, but typically speaking, if you can find a reroll that other people are rerolling the same cost, it's going to make it a little bit easier to hit your board. One of the common ones right now that we see is this Techie Bruiser line, where you go for Seraphine 3-star, and you go for Zyra 3-star, and you go for Mundo 3-star, you go for Alistar 3-star. This works out really well. Mundo usually becomes like a pseudo carry in this comp. He is an absolute demon. A lot of the challenger players talk the meme that he's the gorilla. I don't know if that's the one that people use as a way of describing this comp, but just in case that's a familiar word for you or familiar way of referring to the comp, that's the comp I'm talking about. This Mundo is really flexible on items. You can go full tank. Sometimes you can even put like a Sterix gauge on him. He's really strong, but a lot of times you're playing around AP backline, Bruiser frontline. Mundo also gets additional scaling off HP because his passive is that he gains 30% more max health from all sources. So while he's gaining the HP from no scout, no pivot, he'll actually gain a little bit more, 30% more to be exact, which is actually pretty nice, especially since Bruiser also scales the HP. He gets a lot of work done that way. But typically with this board, I think you usually, there's two variations, but I'm pretty sure the variation is that you play 6 Bruiser now. I'm not 100%, but usually you just scale up. You play your Techie Bruiser line, and then you play a brand, and you have something that looks kind of like this. You could drop and play 6 Techie as well. I don't know which one strictly is better. I think it comes down to itemizations, but you have a level of flexibility. So a lot of times what you want to do is you want to roll at a low level for your 3 stars. Excuse me. And then I need one more. I need Kabuko, right? You usually roll for your 3-star units, right? Your Mundo, your Alistar, your Seraphine, your Zyra. You stay low level, like level 4-ish. And then as soon as you find one Gragas, one Mordekaiser, you hold on to them, and then these can be your next in. This board is a little bit awkward because it's hard to fit in 4 Techie until you have a brand, especially if you're playing no scout, no pivot. You really want the brand because you want to activate the street demon, so it becomes a little bit of a high roll thing, so you can often have to delay Techie. So this is a board that you can sometimes like have trouble hitting your full board with, but it's just something to keep in mind. Another thing that's really strong right now is Morgana. Strictly Morgana with Bastions. So a lot of times if you have a Bastion frontline, you have a Morgana, this is a no-brainer. You should almost always be playing around Morgana in the current patch. I want to be very clear about something. This is a little amendment to previous video that I mentioned. I got a lot of comments. Some of them I banned because they're just straight up rude. Saying that I said that Morgana isn't good in a previous video. Now, I was referring to Morgana strictly in the sense of ranking Blightning Jewel. I was trying to say that I'm not going to make Blightning Jewel S tier because I don't think that this combo is like essential. Maybe it was the word I should say, but I cut it and I said Morgana maybe isn't that great in this situation because I'd rather just play Morgana from a Morgana spot. I wouldn't force Morgana because I have Blightning Jewel, because that just seems like a bad idea, especially if it's a 1-cost reroll. Like if I have no tiers in a Blightning Jewel, that doesn't mean that it's not broken, right? There's other Ornn artifacts that are better in a situation like that. That's all I meant. Now that that's clarified, I want to make this very clear. Morgana is broken. It's fucking strong as shit. You should always be playing this if you have the opportunity to play. It's one of the best comps on the current patch right now. And it's part of the reason why so many of these 1-cost rerolls are becoming more popular, because this comp is a menace to society, or TFT LP. What you usually play is you play Bastion with it. Bastion works out really nicely, actually works out really effectively. So you play Bastion, and then you try and put in the more dynamos later. A lot of times, this Poppy and this Jax actually pop off really hard, and because you're playing Bastions, they actually scale really well. The scaling that you get, because they get a lot of armor and MR, when you 3-star them, they actually get a lot of HP scaling. So 3-star Bastions actually work really effectively with the Morgana setup. Additionally speaking, you can also scale their HP with no scout, no pivot really effectively. So even though you're not making that much use of the AD stat, because a lot of units are mostly on AP style of items, you can actually do really well with this comp. Now, what I was trying to say before when I was saying I don't know if you can force Morgana, it's because Morgana's items are really particular. They're very similar to Vex. So a lot of times you need to start with some tiers because you need blue buff on Morgana. If you don't have blue buff on Morgana, the unit doesn't really function that well. You could push Shojin, but it's just not that good. And a lot of times it's Gunblade, and then your last item is usually a damage item, which you can usually do Jewel Gauntlet, especially if you're scaling your AP through no scout, no pivot. And then when you're trying to cap out this board, you just play more Bastion units. Now, something that's really important is when you're playing around this board, a lot of times it will look something like this. Bastions. Bastions. A lot of times you want to swap out some of the Bastion units that you don't like use that much late game, like things like you want to put in Renekton over the other one. With no scout, no pivot, you just have to be aware that you might not be able to swap out the units later. I put Elise here for that reason. I would actually like wait until I have an Elise a lot of times with this board, because then you can just go for Elise 3 later in the game and cap out your board that way with like 6 Bastion, 2 Dynamo on level 8. Something that looks a little bit like this. It's a little bit hard to play around this comp otherwise, because usually what you're doing is you're playing 6 Bastion and then you're replacing the unit for an Aurora. The thing is, you're just not going to hit an Aurora earlier, so if you're playing strictly no scout, no pivot, I really like having Elise as the secondary carry that I can itemize if I have other backline items, because she actually does like a lot of work, especially as a 3-star unit. And you can put in the Aurora on level 9 if you eventually hit the Aurora, and then just play 3 Dynamo. That's like my recommendation. However, something you can benefit from as well a lot with this comp is similar to Vex. You can stabilize really early, and this is a key part of playing the Bastion Morgana line with a Jhin. Now, if you're playing no scout, no pivot, it feels a little bit bad because you don't necessarily want to be playing like 3-star Jhin here. It just doesn't synergize that well with the board. You're playing more AP, you know, you'd like to make like a Spark or a Shiv and play more that way. So it's a little bit awkward, but you could still play Jhin. And what I would recommend is having a frontline item. I would only do this if I have a frontline item, or if I have a good Jhin early and good Jhin setup early, because having the frontline items you can put on the Jax and eventually move on to Sejuani actually helps out this comp a lot. It gives you a little bit more flexibility in your item economy, because you can focus on some backline items, because you can sacrifice one frontline item in place of the Exotech item. I think that works out a little bit more effectively. So you do have multiple options. Any other Dynamo can work out really well, and you can scale them up pretty effectively, and the Bastions all get a lot of value, especially if you 3-star them. Additionally, if you have more of a melee style focus, you can play Shaco reroll. Shaco will just scale infinite. He already scales with his passive, so he's just going to be double scaling basically. He's going to get extra AD as well as AP. Something that's really important is that especially with AD units, they still have AP scaling. Like if I'm thinking about Vayne as a Slayer, even if all of her abilities say like, you know, the little red axe thing saying that it's an AD unit, you'll look final hit, they'll always have something that scales off AP. So here there's like a 15% AP final hit, and Shaco, there's something that's going to be scaling off AP, right? The damage has like a little bit of an AP scaling as well. So you actually make a lot of value with these type of units, typically speaking, which is really meaningful, because with no scout, no pivot, you get even more stats that are useful in that sense, right? Also, Shaco makes great use of HP, so you're scaling him up like Giga. He's getting AD, HP, and he's getting some AP, which can help him out a little bit in terms of damage. And then when you're playing this line, a lot of times you play 3 Syndicate, which sometimes is a little bit hard to find that Braum early. But a lot of times you can reroll Shaco, reroll for the Mundo, you can push levels with it. A lot of times Shaco is like usually all you need, but you can try and roll for other units as well. And then you play as many Slayers as possible, because that's just going to scale you really well. This comp also works really well from like an early Jarvan or early Jarvan Senna setup, because you can still play like around the Slayer units themselves, like Vanguard Slayers instead of Shaco, which is actually pretty powerful as a comp with the extra bonus stats that you're getting from no scout, no pivot. So that's just something to keep in mind. There's also the low cost Nitro. This is one that works really well because you just want to 3-star everybody. So, you know, you can reroll Nitro into Nitro Dynamo setups around Elise. You can also reroll Nitro into Nitro Amp setups. There's actually many different variations, and I think they're all pretty good. The one that I would usually recommend is the Nitro Elise version. So Elise 3-star. A lot of times you put blue buff Gunblade. It just works pretty effectively. You don't need blunt Gunblade. Sometimes you can put Archangels. Her items are pretty flexible in my opinion past the blue buff, because she just like pumps out damage pretty consistently. So you can go for more of like a scaling build where she's just healing everybody, and then you have like good drain tank setup in the front line. Or you can go for like just raw burst damage with her, just go like JG guard breaker, like crit, and just like burst them down really fast. I think both are decent like in their own right, so I wouldn't worry too much about it. But you can try out different builds and you'll have success, I'm sure. And then this type of build, of course, you would just play around, like, you know, have some Bastion frontline as well, or have some Bastion frontline as well as have some setup for the Elise in terms of Dynamo. There's lots of variations with this as well. You can drop some of the Dynamo units. I'm just saying, or sorry, drop some of the Nitro units. I'm just saying this is another option. There's also Vanguard front lines. If you have a Vanguard front line, there's two different routes you can go. You can go the Slayer route if you're more AD focused. Some people are experimenting with Vanguard Morgana and having some success with it. Very similar to Bastion Morgana. I think Bastion Morgana is the way to go almost always. But if you have a setup that you think is really strong for Vanguard Morgana, you can try it out maybe. I wouldn't recommend it all the time. I think it's a little bit situational. Like maybe you need like that or an artifact emblem type of setup going on there. But just be careful. But these are options that you can try out that I think you'll have good success with, because like I said, as long as you can hit your units, as long as you have a decent enough spot where you can force a reroll out of it, you will scale into late game, which is the main reason why rerolls often can go bot for. Like the biggest thing is that you fall off late game in your damage output, but no scout, no pivot will solve that problem for you. I'm showing a lot of one-cost rerolls because I think that's the current landscape of the game. But of course, if you start on stage 2 with a particular 3-cost setup that is really strong, I didn't put Jarvan Senna here, but I'll put it right now. If you start up with a 3-cost setup that is really strong, like Yuumi Nefiri, for example, 2-cost, 3-cost. Maybe like a Vanguard Jinx. It's a lot more popular now because Street Demon isn't as contested, so Vanguard Jinx is a little bit more of a reroll line that you can go down. Even Jarvan Senna that I just added to the slide, these are really powerful as well if you can scale them up effectively, right? Jarvan especially, he benefits from the HP, he benefits from the AP, and he benefits from the AD with no scout, no pivot. You can play these lines and then they'll just gain stats, and then when you get to level 7, you go for the 3 stars, and then there'll be demons late game and you'll giga spike as soon as you hit them. It's still viable, which is why it works out really nicely. Additionally, Kog'Maw right now isn't that relevant. He's not that strong. I'm going to say it really quietly though, because he's getting buffed next patch, and I don't know if I like that. But the 3-star Kog'Maw, I'm pretty sure they're experimenting right now in PBE to give him a buff. So like this Kog'Maw line, he's already a demon like in order to tempo and streak with, but this guy can actually like maybe be like a pop-off demon if they like buff the 3-star enough. You didn't hear it from me though, right? We'll find out tomorrow when I do the actual patch notes, but I'm just saying this might be viable a little bit in the future. But anyways, that's like the whole thing that I wanted to talk about here. I know it's not like the greatest of videos and maybe it's not super explanatory, but I just want to give you guys different lines. There's lots of flexible options a lot of time, not flexible, but there's lots of options you can commit to based on your opener. A lot of it revolves around Morgana or Techies, so they're more AP focused. But if you have any line that is a reroll line, even if it's not super meta, even if it's not like the comp that you think is giga broken, you often will scale with no scout, no pivot in such a way that is really powerful. The only tips I can give you, like I said with some of the other comps, is always understand that you need to hold on to units on your roll downs. When you're rolling for your 1 cost, hold on to some of the copies of the other units. Always know what your next in is going to be. You never want to be pushing a level without having a copy of your next in, because then once you commit it onto your board, you're stuck with that unit on your board forever and it's GG. So just keep that in mind. Be a little bit cognizant of that as you do it, and try out different comps with it. I'm sure you'll have some sort of success. I've been having a lot of success with it, but of course it might just be a me thing. Maybe it's just like it plays to like something in my brain that I can figure it out on this fly. But try it out. That's what I want to talk about today. I'm a big believer in this augment, and it got recently buffed, so you know, especially with the meta shifting more towards reroll, it's something to look out for if you're not already looking out for it. Thanks for watching. Have a great day, and I hope you guys have a fantastic weekend. Like I said, tomorrow we're going to do patch notes, so if you're looking forward to that, stay tuned. Bye-bye.